So the Meg, which was just recently came out in 2018. Just going to go down some of the bigger films here. Catch Me If You Can, Minority Report, The Other Side of Heaven. Let's see here. Amistad. Jerry has worked with Steven Spielberg for what was your run with Spielberg? 18 films, but how many years, Jerry?
17 films. Well, I never looked at the years. From 1985 until 2001.
Okay. So for quite a while. So the list continues. The Trigger Effect, Twister, Casper, Little Giants, The Little Rascals, Flintstones. Jerry received an Oscar for producing Schindler's List, which is an amazing film. And if you haven't seen it, that should be on your list of must-sees. One I'm sure you've seen is Jurassic Park. He produced Jurassic Park. A Far Off Place, Hook, Curly Sue, Days of Thunder, Rain Man. The list is continuing, and I'm not going to stop. Bright Lights, Big City, Batteries Not Included, The Color Purple, The Soldier Story, Tootsie, Absence of Malice, Ordinary People, Being There. I mean, this list goes on. Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo. I don't know if any of you guys have seen those. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jerry, but Jerry started out his career working with Orson Wells. Is that correct?
Well,
one of them.
No, not really. I mean, well, I wish I could say that I had started out working with him. I was an observer of one of his films when I was a youngster, a mere youngster, and it's kind of what got me interested in film and wanting to be a part of the storytelling world of art.
Yeah, and I think I recall. Tell the story just a little. You were behind a few hay bales. Is that what it was?
Well, the guards at the studio, at Old Republic Studios, they used to take me across the street, and place me behind a bale of hay, under a wagon, any place that I could kind of hide away and watch the filming for the day. Sometimes it became a little bit difficult because the filming might be at the far end of the stage, tucked in a corner, and I couldn't really see them, but I could always hear them. And for those of you who have been around a film set, you know that the assistant director controls the set, and when he yells quiet, everything else, you can hear a pin drop. And as soon as the director yells cut, the noise basically, even though a low ebb of noise, but starts again, the action starts. So it was like a disease. It got under my skin and I could never get rid of it.
I love it. And then another, interesting fact and story that I love is, I don't know if you've seen the film Psycho or not, but there's the famous shot of the car that's driving up to the Bates Motel.
Correct.
And if you go back and look at that shot, it's over the shoulder of Norman Bates, who is played by, at that moment, Gerald Molen, because Jerry was driving the car up to the Norman Bates Hotel.
Yeah, the shot was through the windshield to get the focus on the Bates Motel. It was the arrival, and I was a studio driver back in those days, and they had asked me if I would perform that function. It scared me to death, but we did it and got it in the first shot. But if you can imagine having Alfred Hitchcock sit behind you in a seat in the car, giving you kind of directions, was interesting.
Yeah. So Jerry's career has been, is a fascinating study of a career. Jerry started as a wrangler, I assume. Isn't that what it was? You were wrangling horses?
No, as a truck driver, I used to haul horses in the beginning. In my early days, I started out as a studio driver. And I worked my way up through there. I went from Republic Pictures to when Universal International was purchased by MCA, became Universal City Studios. That was in February of 1959. And then I worked there as a driver for a couple of years, became assistant head of transportation. 4 years later, I was head of transportation. I had 300 employees in the transportation department, almost 400 plus pieces of equipment. And it was all within a studio to function, not just a studio, but also any of the movies that were made. And I got into running independent films. And that took me up through transportation on some of those films that you named earlier. And that got me into production. My first job as a production manager was The Postman Always Rings Twice. That was 1980. That way I can keep a time factor involved with, as we move here. And then 1985, my first job with Spielberg as a production manager was on The Color Purple. And then he offered me my first job as a producer. Right after that, on a little picture called Batteries Not Included. And I turned it down because I'd never worked in post-production and I didn't want to blow it. So I was the production manager, associate producer on that little film. And it was a few years later when he called me back then to produce the movie Hook. And then just after that, I joined his company running production for Amblin Entertainment. It was the best job in Hollywood because any movie that he produced or he directed, I got to produce. And any movie that the company did that he didn't particularly direct, I still got to oversee it and function as the exec producer on a great career, blessed career. One of those, there was a young guy one time, I had gone up to BYU to visit with the class, film class up there with a wonderful teacher, Dr. Charles Metten. And I went up, met with the class, went back to my office, and a couple days later, I got a phone call from Dr. Metten asking me if I remembered a young man named Chet Thomas. And I said, well, not really. He said, well, I meant to really make sure that you guys connected because he wanted to talk to you, and he's willing to drive from Provo down to Los Angeles if you would see him. So if the kid wanted to make the trip down there, I said, I'll be glad to see him. Anyway, we set it up. Chet came down for his 30 minutes in my office and was there over an hour. I was so taken with this young guy. And it turned out that one of the people within the Amblin entertainment world was in charge of hiring and future hiring. And I think her name was also Thomas, no relation. But I called her on the telephone and got Chet an immediate appointment since he was down there from Provo. Chet went up, met her. She also fell in love with him. He went back, finished his schooling, and when he finished that, he immediately had a job at Amblin. So we had the pleasure of working together over the next few years. And I guess it was in 2001. Chet was just finishing up on an assignment, and I was just starting a brand new movie called Minority Report. And I had basically left Amblin and was out on my own, and Stephen had called me back to produce that film. And so I called Chet and I said, come help me. So he was my right-hand associate on that film. And we've kind of been connected at the hip ever since, all these years. I've had the pleasure and the honor to be associated with he and his partner, Darren Fletcher. And I've watched him do a lot of things that I'm very proud of these young guys, and makes me even prouder to be here today at their request.
Well, that is very kind, Jerry. I appreciate that. And it's been a pleasure knowing Jerry and just watching his career. It's a perfect example. I want everybody to understand that, Jerry went from driving to producing the best film that's ever been made in film history, Schindler's List, and receiving an Oscar for it. And so that just speaks volumes to Jerry's character. There's no way we'll be able to dig, as deep as we should to understand, all of who Jerry is and what makes him who he is and why he rose to the top of the very top. But there are two things that I'll mention, and then we'll open up to questions. But the first one is, Jerry has always said that if whatever job you do, make sure you do it the best that you possibly can do it. If you're shoveling manure, be the best manure shoveler in the world. And I think that's what Jerry's done. When he was doing doing a job as the transportation coordinator, he was always looking at the schedule, which has nothing to do with the transportation coordinator, and making suggestions to the unit production manager saying, hey, what if we did this, or what if we did that? And then the unit production manager said, man, that's a great idea. We just saved ourselves a day of shooting. And those kinds of things are what people recognize and said, man, Jerry is the best at whatever he does. Let's have him do this. And eventually, Steven Spielberg, who's, one of the best directors in the world, has Jerry by his side, directing every film or producing every film. So that's character trait number one that I have just admired of Jerry. And character trait number two is Jerry has an integrity that I have seen matched in no other. And the crews absolutely, will take a bullet for Jerry. And because he makes sure that everyone is treated fairly, everyone has, is on the crew is important. For Jerry, whether it's a PA or another producer, for Jerry, you really wouldn't know that there's a difference when the way he deals with those people. And that's what makes Jerry unique, awesome, and has given him the career that he has had. And he's also talented at what he does. So with that, anyway, we are all honored to have Jerry with us today. One of the best producers. I claim the best producer in Hollywood. I know he wouldn't, because he's also humble, but the best producer in Hollywood. So let's open it up for questions. Everyone chime in.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So this question can go for both of you, but what was the moment in your life that it sort of clicked and you decided that you wanted to go into filmmaking? Like, what was your first inspirational moment?
I'm gonna let Jerry answer all the questions. Go ahead, Jerry.
Well, for me, as a youngster, my parents moved from the farmlands of Montana to Southern California when I was just shy of 12 years old. And my parents got to Southern California with no plans. My father found a piece of property across from the main gate of Republic Pictures and decided those people needed a place to eat. So he built a little tiny cafe, very, very small cafe, and went about feeding a lot of the movie stars of that era at Republic were Westerns, Roy Rogers and Gene Autry. These may be people you've never heard of. But for me as a youngster, I was in a whole new world. And as time went on and we got to know the guards at the studio, I became their friend. And they would, escort me, come get me on a given day, and escort me over, and they would, as I mentioned earlier, put me behind a bale of hay someplace on a soundstage, under a wagon, someplace hiding in a set, or on the back lot, and where I would be able to watch them shoot a Western. And that was basically, I would say the first film probably, but at least that combination of films over the next couple of years that I knew that I wanted to work in movies. I had no idea doing what. I had no design on making films. I had no design on producing or being a cinematographer or anything particular. I just wanted to work on movies. I wanted to be a part of that business. So after high school, I enlisted in the Marine Corps. And when my enlistment was over, I was a young married guy by that time, and went back to Hollywood with the idea that I was going to go to work in the film business. So I tried, first of all, the camera department, trying to get a job in camera, and at the same time, makeup. I mean, those are two diverse parts of filmmaking, but I knew people very well that were in those particular fields, and I always found what they did and what they talked about being interesting. So anyway, make a long story short, there were no jobs. So I found work, and I was managing a little company in the San Fernando Valley there. And one day I got a phone call telling me that they were hiring truck drivers at Old Republic Pictures. Same studio right across the street from what was then my parents' little restaurant. And I had to quit that job with basically no notice to accept that. And I made the decision that I needed to do that. So I started on the following Monday driving a truck. And my first job was working with another driver, hauling furniture from soundstage to a storage unit in downtown Hollywood. And I thought that it was the cat's meow. I thought I had really arrived being involved with that part of hauling furniture that was used on movie sets. And it was just over a period of time, things changed. 2 years later, I went to Universal. Right after I went there, the little job came up that Chet had mentioned earlier about working on the filming of the movie Psycho. And just little things like that, all part of the, shall I call it resume? Because I look at everything that I ever did as a factor in my being able to climb the so-called ladder. And I always tell people that I started just a little bit below the bottom rung on the ladder. And so I've seen it all, I've tried it all. And I wouldn't change a word. I'm now 86 years old. I've been retired for a few years. Still keep my hand in it. Still have a few projects out there that I advise on or try to help people with. But I still look back at that as my fondest years. And I'm very, very lucky. I have my sweet partner that we've been married 66 years. And she has shared every one of these moments with me. I wouldn't trade that for the world. I think film is a part of the greatest art that anyone can be involved with because it deals with storytelling. And one doesn't have to look back too far when you think about how storytelling began. Because if you go back into some of the old caves where they find hieroglyphics, paintings on walls, it means that somebody painted those little pictures there. And it probably meant that somebody stood there and used those little pictures to tell his neighbors, friends, people that lived in the clan, whatever it was, stories. So how that grew over the years into storytelling, whether it was through books and art. It finally developed into film. And my goodness, when we look at the number of films now that in a year that are streamed, that are put out there. It's absolutely phenomenal. And to be a great storyteller, one just has to have a gift that was given to him by God. That's our imagination. You just have to use it.
Great question. Great answer. Thank you, Cassandra. And you are a fine example of how you should set dress, design a room, and light that room so it comes off cinematically beautiful. You've done a great job with your room. You must have some lighting background.
My room here, yeah.
No, I'm talking about Cassandra's room. If you look at Cassandra's room, she's got it lit. It's beautiful posters on the wall.
Oh yeah, no, it's fantastic.
You've done a great job. So anyway, okay, another question. Sammy, you got a question?
Yeah. What do you think the most challenging and then the most rewarding part of being a producer is?
The most challenging is finding a story that you like. The most demanding part of that, then once you find it, don't give up. Because there's a certain process that you're going to have to go through once you find a story that you really like. And you acquire the rights to that story. If it's not something you've written yourself, once you acquire the rights to the story, then you need to start figuring out how you're going to get it, to get a camera crew together to make it all work. I really think finding the project is the most important, obviously, and the most challenging. But it's that tenacious, never-ending, righteous attitude of never giving up.
Great, Sammy, thank you. What other questions? I can't see you all, so if you've got a question, go ahead and chime right in.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
What has it been like to see kind of technology changing, and like since you've been in the film industry for so long, and how it's changed and how you've had to adapt? If you could just talk about that, that'd be awesome.
Great question.
That is a great question, because what the technology does, each of you sitting on the other side of this meeting today have more knowledge now about the process, the equipment that's used, than I do. What I have is the knowledge of who to hire to see that it gets done properly. And then I can oversee that and I can manage that part of it. But to have the knowledge of the camera, the lighting and all that, and how it all works now in a miniature sense, I find that something I'd really like to go back and learn more about it, but not enough time now.
Jurassic Park was, I mean, you have really stretched the bounds, and you've seen technology just go, I mean, Jurassic Park.
Well, that's a great example. That's a great example, Chet, because Jurassic Park was the first film where that challenge was thrown at all of us. We had designed the film, scheduled the film, budgeted the film, all with a design of using stop motion to film the sequences with the dinosaurs. All stop motion, very, very time consuming. One day we were going to have a meeting at one of the well, he would have been, I'm trying to remember what they called him on that. Anyway, he took care of all the animatronics. A guy named Stan Winston. God bless him, he's gone now. He won an Academy Award for Jurassic Park. But we were having a meeting at his shop. Dennis Mirren, the man who was more involved with the computer work and the design of that, called that he was traveling down from San Francisco to where we were going to be, to meet with us to show us something. He arrived. We all anxiously awaited his inserting a VHS tape into a tape player. And on the screen, we were treated to a skeletal T-Rex running across the tundra. And it blew every one of us away because it was so fluid. And realizing that there hadn't been a lot of time, Spielberg jumped all over it immediately. How in the world did you do this? That led into this phenomenal question that affected me in another way, because I had been making trips to San Francisco to meet with another one of the gentlemen that worked on the film. His name is Phil Tippett, probably the world's most renowned
Animator, right? CGI.
CGI. Well, no, not
Stop
at
motion.
that time. At that time, it was all the time movement. Yeah, that would have been Phil. But anyway, we were making a deal with him to do all the stop motion, and it stopped it. Stopped all the negotiation. But we had taken him so far, held him off of another movie, and this was why working with Spielberg was a pleasure. He honored the idea that we had talked to this guy, and we kept him on the film. He was also one of the 4 guys that received one of the Academy Awards for the special effects, visual effects, and that. But it introduced CGI to the world and changed filmmaking forever from that point on.
I mean, what's exciting about this, and many of you may not get this, and Andy, I'm sorry, Mr. Berghow does, I'm sure, but these are the names that Jerry's mentioning are the biggest and the best and the pioneers of all of this. Anyways, but just one little comment on that, Jerry, and you can correct me. Of Jurassic Park, the first one, I mean, they were blazing trails of of technology. Actually, how many minutes of dinosaurs are actually in Jurassic Park? I think it's only like a minute and a half.
Well, you're close. You're close, and I'm going to see if I can remember. It seems to me that there are. Oh my gosh, I don't want to give you bum information, but it seems to me that I want to say that there's 9.5 minutes of dinosaurs in the film. Of that, just 2.5 minutes of it were CGI. The rest of it was, well, I'll tell you how you can tell. Any scene that had a close-up of a dinosaur's foot, a head, the body, that was all done on stage animatronically, with animatronics. If it was a wide shot showing multiple dinosaurs, or the actions of where the T-Rex stepped out and chomped down on a dinosaur, that was all computer graphic imaging. I'm really sorry that I don't have those numbers. I just don't remember anymore. I'm sorry.
Well,
the age factor.
I'm sure we can look it up online, but my point is that, I mean, they were on the forefront of the technology, and less than 10 minutes of that movie, of a 90 whatever plus minute movie, was dinosaurs, and it was like so memorable and awesome. And I'll have you note, if you go back and look at Jurassic Park, when we have the sick, now what dinosaur was it, Jerry? It was a Stegosaurus?
Triceratops.
Oh yeah, a sick Triceratop. You'll notice there was a doctor that came in and was talking, to those our leads there, and that doctor would be Mr. Gerry Molen, and Jerry became a little bit of an icon. If you watch a lot of Stevens movies, you'll have a little cameo of Jerry in there, and I think it was Stevens' way to put a little kiss of good luck on the movie. And it was one of Jerry's favorite things. Jerry loves acting.
Yeah, right. Yeah, not my favorite thing.
Yeah.
I'd rather
He's
be
also
behind the
like,
camera.
Tom Cruise demanded that he act against Jerry. Anyway, I won't let Jerry debunk that one or not. But anyways, another question.
Well, I need to ask, in a film like Jurassic Park, oops, am I muted?
Andy, we can barely hear you.
Okay. How about now?
Yep.
Good.
I'm unmuted, but I just wanted to ask if during Jurassic, particularly Jurassic Park, there was ever a moment for the production team going, I don't know if this is going to work. That moment where you're just like, you know, you're trying something so new. Did you ever feel like this is not coming together?
Well, I don't know that I ever had that feeling, because, you know, when you're going to work on a Steven Spielberg movie, you have the license to hire only the best. You don't want to hire somebody that's going to give you second best or put you in a position of saying, I don't know if I got that or not. So whether it was for financial reasons, that sometimes you know, entered into it, but always the artistic value in the ability of the people that worked on a film. Okay, it could only be considered to be the best at what they did. So that didn't come up too often. People usually had any issues resolved. But that's not saying that Spielberg didn't challenge people all the time, but they were usually smart enough.
There is one moment, a story that I'd like you to tell, Jerry, where there was a moment on set where they were trying to figure out how to do a particular thing. And I think it was a grip that came up, and it had to do with a guitar, a bass guitar. Do you remember the story of the water?
Yeah, that was in Jurassic Park. There was the scene in there where there was something on the dash that had water in it. Can't remember now.
Wasn't it there was a cup on the water, cup on the dash, but there was also the big footprint, the T-Rex footprint in the water.
Right, but the first place it came up was in the glass that was on the dashboard, I think. And the idea was how to get the concentric movement in the water. And that was a special effects guy who came up with the idea of using a banjo string and putting that on the dash and just plucking it, and automatically the concentric rings. So it's just little things like that make filmmaking such a wonderful asset.
Yeah.
In life.
That was one of those moments like, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? And somebody figured it out.
Yep.
Okay. Another question.
I had a question. You touched on this earlier about how the story is what really draws you to a project. And I wanted to know, like, what exactly about a screenplay that really captures your attention and that you want to invest in?
Well, I think that for me, I can only speak for me personally. I love adventure movies. I love challenge movies. But most of all, I think it's the story in the beginning. It's just, you know, something that kind of grabs you. That gee, this story needs to be told. It's one of those things. Maybe not just for me, but you look at it and you see, you know, the people would really, really like to see this story told. And almost not all films did I have. No, I'm in the middle of a broadcast, honey. Sorry, my sweet little wife made lunch. Forgive me. Where was I?
The stories of that you like.
Yeah, it's amazing how as a young man and growing up, I never really had a choice on the stories. When I read a script, if I didn't particularly like it, then my choice would be don't work on it. but normally, if you get to the point to where during my early years, any project that I went to work on, I was in love with from the very beginning. Wanted to do my part to make it the best it could be. As I got into my more senior years and the latter part of my career, then it became more of, why do I like this? Does this have some meaning for the world? And could be a little bit more concerned, a little bit more choosy in the projects. It's like today, if a young man named Chet comes to me with a project, probably the first thing I'll say is, do you have a script so I can read it? Because I'm going to want to know, what it is. Do I have an interest to get involved? And normally I only do that for people like Chet Thomas, because he and his partner are the ultimate in filmmaker today. And between them and a couple other projects, I don't even seek outside projects anymore.
It's all about the story resonating,
It
The
is.
story resonates with you.
Well said. All about the story.
You're passionate about it, and you may work. Jerry and I have been working on a project called The Best Christmas Pageant Ever for, I don't know how, 13 years, 15 years. So it takes a long time.
Man, yeah. And look how many, it's a great project to think about, because it's a very well-known story. It's been taught in schools by teachers who want to teach their students certain things, and it's been seen by over 10 million people in stage plays around the country. And like Chet said, we have worked on this project, never given up. We've kept the rights to it for all these years, and just can't quite make it over the top so that we could hear a director for the first time yell action. We just haven't got there.
We're getting close, though. We're getting close.
I hope so.
Okay, another question. Good question, Natalie.
I have a question. I was wondering, what are some major differences from working on a smaller film set for more of an independent film versus a bigger production, and which one would you prefer?
I go back again to the story. I'd have to make a decision. With story. And I guess a good example would be the one that Chet just brought up, Best Christmas Pageant Ever, because that'll be in a size of film project. It'll be a smaller film, less time to shoot it, less money to shoot it. The thing about a major film is you probably got the money. You still have to budget it carefully. You have to watch, how you're going to spend your money, or maybe move your money around to be prepared for changes. It's a hard question for me, because I've worked on both. I find the smaller films more challenging than the bigger ones, because the bigger ones, you've got the people and the money to probably solve any issues you might have. On a small, independent film, where you don't really have all the money you need, all the people you need, you have to be very, very creative on how you handle situations, or decide, what you're going to leave in and what you're going to take out. That's a good question.
Good question. Another question.
So I guess I have a question. It sounds like you've worked on a lot of different films in a lot of different roles. Is there one in particular that you would say is your favorite film you've worked on, or is there a contribution you've made that you're proudest of throughout your career?
Well, that's a great question. How does one weigh the moments in a career that are lasting and most memorable? I would say that, going back again to what Chet said earlier, probably the one film that I have the most pride in, and I don't mean this to sound self-serving, believe me, I don't mean it that way, but it would be Schindler's List, because of the impact that the film had on the world itself. Number one, for the film coming out, the story told, it was all factual. And for me personally, to be able to work on that film and have people there that were actually a part of the Schindler's List world, that to me was the making of the film. There were many, many days, if not most, not all, but almost all, that I don't think that there was ever a day that didn't have a wet eye, because of the impact of the meaning of what was going on in that story and the story that was being told, the impact it had on people's lives. When the film was over, we had traveled to Europe to exhibit the film. And on a trip on the way back, the conversation came up from Mr. Spielberg about how many people would come up to him and say, "Tell my story." The interesting thing about that is, for all the years prior to that, for the most part, most survivors never wanted their stories told because they brought too much pain, loss of family or whatever. And they found themselves in this terrible position. And this particular movie, as it told this story about this phenomenal individual who basically gave up everything, and also to his own life, not knowing what the reaction might be. But all those survivors, all those people that survived, were brought up on these plane trips going back because, on this one particular plane trip, about the people who wanted their stories told. Sorry, I got off track here. And one of us, I don't remember who, now it doesn't matter, one of us said, well, what we should start doing is videotaping some of these stories. And it was like a major moment for Stephen, because he saw it immediately. And that became basically the inception for the Shoah Foundation. Shoah Foundation being an organization that basically dealt only with survivors. And so we got back, Mr. Spielberg put up an extremely large amount of money. The head of the studio, who's now gone now, Sid Sheinberg, who first found the project and bought it for Universal. He put up an enormous amount of money and turned it over to myself, Bronco Lustig, who we just lost this last year, and a young lady named Karen Bittenson. They turned it over to us, and we set this program up, basically videotaping survivor stories. And the goal was 50,000 interviews. And not to worry, but it seems it was, our goal was in 3 years to have 50,000. And we were just over the 3-year mark. I got a phone call one day, basically from Mr. Spielberg, suggesting that the 50,000th interview was coming up and he wanted me to conduct it. And I'd never done that before. And I said, well, number one, why do you want me? And who is it? And he said, well, it's you and it's Bronco Lustig, the other producer on the film. Because Bronco was also a survivor of Auschwitz. And that's a whole other story. But I said, okay. So I interviewed Bronco at his home one day for 4 or 5 hours and heard stories in that interview about his family and how he lost his father, how his and how he found his mother. Because when they were picked up by the Germans and sent to Birkenau, a woman told her, asked her, how old's your son? She said, he's 10. And the woman said, if he's 10, he's dead. He's 13. If anybody asks you, your son is 13, figure out whatever you have to figure out, but your son is 13. 13, he can survive. So they got to Birkenau, and that's one of the first things they asked him, how old is your son? He's 13. The guy kind of raised an eyebrow, sent him that way and sent her that way, which normally usually would have meant he survives, she doesn't. But when the war ended, and here's this young, now probably 13, 14-year-old boy, heading home to Krakow. And the Yugoslavian army had set up a perimeter, and they're interviewing all the people going back into that part of the world. And this officer was interviewing him, and he asked him, he said, well, tell me about your parents. He said, well, my mother lost her. My father owned a hotel, and what hotel was that? And when he named the hotel, the guy said, your mother, I just interviewed her. Because her husband owned that hotel. So Bronco got home, found his mother. She had survived. And he was, Chet knew him. He was just a phenomenal human being. Great filmmaker. He had gotten into filmmaking as a young man in Yugoslavia. And could speak 4 languages. The 5th being English. He did a pretty good job with that too. But 4 fluent languages, and just a phenomenal human being. We had a chance to enjoy part of his life with him. Sorry.
No, and on the topic of Schindler's List and the impact that it had on you, would you share one of your most memorable moments on set? Something that happened, you know, the one that comes to my mind, but you can tell whichever one is the incident of the snow and Stephen wanting snow and not snow, and then, you know.
Well, that's a great.
If you could tell that story, that'd be awesome.
No, it's an amazing thing about snow, because when there was a time when we were prepping the movie Jurassic Park, and it was like in February of 1992. It's amazing how I can remember some things because of their pertinence to the moment. But we were on the soundstage, and we were prepping Jurassic Park, and Stephen just casually said, by the way, I want to do Schindler's List next. I went, oh, okay. I was imagining that it would be like most movies. You finish this one, you go through post-production, and then maybe while in post-production, you start prepping the next one. He said to me, Jerry, you don't quite get what I'm saying. What is it? He said, I want to do it immediately following the filming of this, Jurassic Park. And I said to him, well, Stephen, I said, if that's the case, if we start filming in August on Jurassic and we finish in December, you want to shoot that winter in the snow? And he said, yeah. I went, okay, let me think about it. So I went home that night thinking about this, went back the next day. I went to him and I said, Schindler's List, next? I said, we can do it. We need to do 2 things. We need to hire another producer, and we need to know where we're going. So 2 weeks later, we were on a jet airplane flying to Copenhagen. And that was, I think, Stephen's first idea of filming. But it came out that Krakow, Poland was still there, and that's where the story took place. So we popped over there, and that became the idea. This is where we're going to shoot the movie. Hired Bronco. He kind of oversaw everything on that particular film. And when Jurassic Park was over, we spent Christmas and the holiday at home, and then I took off and went to Poland, started getting things ready because the snow wasn't going to last that long. And we started filming March 1, 1993 in Krakow, Poland. Finished last day of May. The point Chet's getting to is when I arrived in Poland, there was no snow. And our film date of March 1st, March 2nd, what it was firm to try to keep up with the snow. And Bronco and I had made plans to haul snow in Polish army trucks out of the mountains and place the snow wherever we had to place it to try to make it work, to get the snow in. And Stephen arrived at the location 1 week prior to filming in a blinding snowstorm. We literally picked him up at the airport in the snow, drove in the snow, and went around showing him all the places that the art department had found to film this, film that. Looking at costumes, at actors, at everything in the snow. So we started filming, got to the point to where we no longer needed snow. In fact, we had to move into the next phase of the story that could not have snow. So on the Saturday prior to it, we were filming an interior shot, which you never want to waste your interiors because you need those for cover if it rains or something. And but here we were shooting and making plans for whatever on the following Monday. And I got up Sunday morning, day off, opened my drapes up, and the hotel we were in was right on the border of a giant grass area. I'll call it almost like the size of a football field. And that was right on the Vistula River. And across the river on the other side was the walls around the city of Krakow. No snow. Freak front had come in, the night melted the snow. 9:30, my phone rings and it's Mr. Spielberg, and he says to me, "Jerry, how did you do this?" I laughed and I said, "Well, stick with me, boss." So we'll get there. Had no idea. I mean, no snow. About 2 weeks later, we were filming lunch on the set one day, and I got a message, Spielberg wants to have lunch with you. So I went to have a bowl of soup with him. And he says to me, he wouldn't look at me. He wouldn't look at me. So I knew there was something up. But anyway, he said to me, I want to shoot the boxcar scene. And I said, well, Stephen, we wrote that out. And I said, my goodness, I said, that requires snow. I said, the whole scene is opening up the boxcar and seeing the frozen bodies. And he wouldn't look at me. I know, I want to shoot it. And I said, okay, fine. Let me go to work on it. So when I got Bronco and I said, you better start finding out how far we got to drive to get snow. Get the Army to pick up snow for us. Make a long story short, again on a Saturday, because we were filming Saturdays over there. But on Saturday, we started to get, a cold front came in and it snowed. And it got cold and we could see the breath that we needed. And that particular scene that was in the movie, in the end, when Stephen was doing his editing, and he had to, we were 3 hours and 3 minutes, whatever it was. No, 12 minutes. And we had to get a time out of it. So that whole sequence and everything that tied to it was excised out of the film. Just another one of the great stories that took place on in that movie.
Well, it was certainly a divinely touched movie.
Divine
So,
Hands. Yep.
wait, probably in all the movies that you make, you know, there may be one or two that have that kind of significance, and
It's rare. That's actually rare. Yeah.
rare, yeah. Well, why don't we, thank you, Jerry. Why don't we finish, Mr. Burhow, why don't you give us some little last words and maybe one last question, if you don't mind.
Well, again, I just want to thank you both for taking your time and just Chet, what you and Fletch have done with Sneak on the Lot and what the opportunities that has created for our program and the students. That's just been awesome. We've just really enjoyed some of your units that you've offered, and the challenges that you guys have had have prompted us. We've spent some time in the last couple of weeks talking about what producers do and looking at all the jobs and having that discussion. So it's been, for me personally, I found it kind of reinvigorating and inspiring, especially with what COVID has done to, you know, these kids haven't been in school since March 13th was the last day that they got to be in the classroom. And that's all much, much longer than any of us had anticipated. And we're hoping that they're going to get to be back in the classroom soon. One of the teams is going to be doing a digital cinema production contest starting here for our SkillsUSA regional competition in early February. So it's exciting to have this opportunity to hear from professionals and just really want to thank you. But is there anyone who's got a last question that they'd like to ask?
I've got a question, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So when you're hiring someone, whether it be like a director or a writer, what kind of qualities do you look for in someone who you want to work on your film set or pre-production or post-production, anything like that?
Well, I think the first thing that I would look for is how passionate the person is about the project, number one, how sincere they are. But I would also want to know, and would assume that I would know a lot more about their background already. If I'm going to sit down with somebody, I'm going to check you out. I'm going to know a little bit more about you, where you come from, and I want to know if you are going to, match up to my expectations on what my needs are, what my hopes are, what my dreams are, and if you're going to be a part of that, filming it. A great example of that is this young man who's been that set this up, and that's Chet Thomas. I mean, there's no better example, to my mind, of someone who speaks to all the qualities of perfection, and knows when to make those tough decisions. I think, and I go back again to the passion on how earnest the person is about their desire to do it.
Good question, Nathan. I think one of the things that just, working well with others is so critically important. No matter how good you are, your passion to do the best that you can do and do the best job you can ever do goes a long ways. Well, we want to thank you guys all for joining us today. I think you can mark this down as a moment that you, when your son or grandson is making films, you can say, well, way back when I had to walk uphill both ways going to school in the snow or the rain. The rains in Washington were flooding the streets, and we had to have our boots on to get to school. Or COVID, I guess you could just say COVID. I got to be, have a one-on-one conversation with the producer, Gerald Molen. It's what a great opportunity. And Jerry, we want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and we hope that we haven't delayed lunch too long, and Pat will forgive me for having it sit on the table.
No. Number one, no, it's Chet, it's you. So she's not going to be upset at all, knowing that. But it was my honor. I was very, very pleased, and I feel privileged to be able to talk to these young filmmakers, the future filmmakers, and I look forward to seeing not just your work, your name in lights, and I want to see the answer to your dreams. And to you, Andy, thank you, sir. You are so important in what you do, and I'm honored to have met you, sir. I appreciate that. God bless. Chet, I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, everybody.
God bless.
Thank you.
God bless.
All right, everybody. Your weekend is coming up. You have projects that are due next week. So let's find this new invigorated energy to get those wrapped up and get those turned in. And remember that our last class for the semester will be meeting next Tuesday. So I want to be able to look at some of your projects, hopefully, and just real excited to see what you guys come up with. All right. Make sure you reach out by email, or if you have any questions or have any concerns that are coming up that are getting in your way of getting things done. Okay. All right, everybody. Unless you guys have, I'll stick around if anyone has a question, but.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Brown.
Hey.
I wanted to ask if, so I know we need to do 2 projects for the end of the semester. Could I like count the music video towards one of my projects?